Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover podcast presented by the Field of 68. I'm joined with Blackwell and Charles Branch as always, but we got a special guest today. We got Chris Stewart, the voice of Alabama basketball, and recently announced the voice of Alabama football. Chris, how are you doing today down in Gainesville?
Guys, I'm great. I appreciate you having me on. I'm honored you'd asked.
Appreciate you being here. I know it's a busy time a year for you, and obviously the last 2 weeks have been kind of a roller coaster for you.
Hmm.
Um, but let's just get started here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the game. Level set the game on Saturday. I was at the game. I think Charles was also at the game. From my perspective, that was probably the best crowd that Alabama has had as far as like an environment
Yeah.
and fan involvement in the last I don't even know how many years. And it had major implications that we probably haven't seen in Tuscaloosa as far as a title or a championship in the last 20 years. What are your thoughts on the game, maybe the outcome or the just the overall environment?
Well, I can sum up the outcome quickly. It stunk. No, let me tell you, it was the only negative, and it's obviously the most important thing. I'm not trying to sidestep that or sugarcoat it, but as somebody has been around the program in 22 years doing the play-by-play with basketball, and we won two championships in the last 3 years. And Saturday would have been huge. But Brian and I were talking to the Tuscaloosa Tip Off Club. Brian Passing and I were talking to the Tip Off Club today about this very thing. The fact that for whatever reason, while we've had certainly big games in the years that we won the title, you got to remember 3 years ago was the COVID year. So you had less than half capacity. You had this past year when Bama won the title, there were some massive games and some great crowds. But for some reason, I may be remembering it wrong. I don't think the biggest home games fell on a Saturday. It seems like our biggest, best opponents were midweek or on the road. So you didn't have a chance to have what you had Saturday. And I think that's part of why we haven't had game day. We haven't had the right opponent at the right time in Tuscaloosa over the last 4 years. And so you have Tennessee, top five team, worthy of that clearly, and an Alabama team that worked its way to top 15 and top scoring team in the country. There are a lot of storylines, and it fit. You knew that there was a really good chance game day would be there. And to me, the environment, I'm not talking about the outcome of the game or excuse me, even the game itself necessarily, but game day being there and all that led up to tip off and even the crowd within the game itself. To me, it was almost a celebration of what's happened in the last 3 to 4 years. It was that part was really cool. The only way it could have been more perfect is if we win that ball game, but it didn't happen. Uh, it was a great environment, but here's the deal, guys. You talk newer buildings all you want. The concourses, restrooms, amenities, all that, Coleman, uh, are on par with just about anywhere else. They do a really nice job at Coleman. The bad seats are bad. We know that. They're a long way away. We know that. Do we want new and better? Yes, of course we do. But nobody's won more home games in the S. Nobody's won more games in their own building in the SEC in the last 3 4 years than Alabama has. They've been terrific, and that will continue with Nate Oates as the head basketball coach at the University of Alabama until we're able to get the new facility that everybody that is a fan of or supports the program or is involved in the program hopes to see. The game itself, too many missed opportunities against too good of a team. If it's a lesser team, you probably can still manage to win that game. But against Tennessee, you're only going to get so many opportunities, and there were definitely some missed opportunities. You can talk Latrell Wrightsl's absence and the impact. Did it hurt? Of course it did. But that wasn't the only thing. Alabama still had enough in place that if they if they make a couple more shots that were there, if they get a couple of more loose ball opportunities and rebounds on the defensive end instead of giving Tennessee second chance opportunities, Alabama still wins that game despite not being at its best and still not being at full strength. So here's the thing about it now, guys. With this league, it's not over with yet. You know, there's still a chance to get a ring, and be it shared or won outright. There's an opportunity to have a piece of the title, and that doesn't happen if you don't take care of business on Tuesday night here in Gainesville. But that is still very much on the table, even though you got to get help somewhere else now.
And we're talking about shared titles and just a larger picture. Common theme that we've had and with like Richard Hendricks last week when he was on the show that we talked about is, in my opinion, I feel like this is Nate Oates' best coaching job done at Alabama, and maybe even in his college career as far as a head coach is concerned. Would you tend to agree with that, and maybe elaborate a little bit on maybe some of the challenges that he's had to face this season?
Well, you're coming off of an SEC title. You're coming off being the nation's #1 seed for the NCAA tournament and getting to a Sweet 16 and losing a heartbreaker to a team that lost the national title game. That was a phenomenal, historic year for Alabama basketball. You then lose the 3 assistants that have helped you build Alabama basketball to where it was to that point. They all 3 get Division I head coaching jobs. Maybe the first time that's ever happened off of one staff. With them goes a good bit of the support staff, because those people get a chance to be promoted and go. Not everybody leaves, but a lot leave to go either to Georgia Southern with Charlie, to Arkansas State with Brian, or go with Pet to Kennesaw State. So, Nate joked about it. He said, I'd had to hire staff just to have somebody to talk to around the office. There's nobody in there. But he rebuilds his staff. And oh, by the way, you got to sign, for different reasons, 9 new players to go with your 3 returning guys, only one of which was your regular everyday starter, and that was Mark Sears. Now, look, Mark Sears, Rylan Griffin, and Nick Pringle are 3 good guys to build around, but that was all you had among the scholarship returnees. You don't know what 9 new guys, how they're going to fit. And he gets them, and he not only makes them fit, it's a close group in an incredibly short, most of those guys didn't even know each other 12 months ago. And here they are with 2 games left, right in the mix for an SEC title, for a top, a 3 or a 4 seed probably in the NCAA tournament, depending on what happens down the stretch. They're in a great spot to be right where that team was last year in the Sweet 16 and maybe beyond. I've said for 6 months, this team's best basketball would come in February and March, because it was going to take them that long to really figure things out collectively. And minus the hiccup of losing, almost said Latrell Sprewell, but Latrell Reitzel. Latrell Sprewell in his heyday would have been a big loss too, but maybe not so much now. But Reitzel, you lose, and there's some momentum that's lost. Whether you still should have overcome it to have won your most recent ball game, and they're talented enough to overcome that. But you're at your best when you've got him, and this is what you want to be at your best this time of year. You get them back, and you get him back playing like he was. This is as dangerous a team as anybody in the country, and I'm still extremely excited to see what they're going to look like. And I'm not making any plans for anything but basketball until the end of March, the 1st of April, and then I got to cram and get ready for A-Day. So and I've even got some baseball games mixed in on SEC Plus. So it'll be a busy time, but basketball is going to take top priority during this stretch.
Well, hopefully they don't send Alabama to Spokane or Salt Lake City. That would be
Send me, that would not be ideal, but send me west, I'll do the rest. That's always been the slogan in the NCAA tournament. And actually the year that we recognized and honored the 03-04 Elite Eight team just a couple of weeks ago in Tuscaloosa, and that team got shipped west. We played 2 games in Seattle, defeated Southern Illinois, which was coached by Matt Painter at the time, beat them. Petway hits a shot with about 5 seconds to go, and they miss a buzzer beater on the other end. Bama goes in the second round and upsets the #1 national seed in Stanford and advances to the Sweet 16. They beat the reigning champions in Syracuse to go to the Elite Eight for the only time in program history. So, and that was in Phoenix. So, and unfortunately had to lose to the buzzsaw in UConn in the next game. But we've been pretty good when we've been sent west in the NCAA tournament. Beat Marquette. Gosh, back when Ronald Steele, Richard Hendricks, John Felix, I've forgotten who else, defeated Marquette in, I think, at least 1, maybe 2 overtimes in the first game, and then Bama loses. I think Ronald missed a shot in the last 5 seconds, last 10 seconds, that would have beaten UCLA and sent that team to the Sweet 16 as well. And UCLA played in the national championship that year. That was a really, really good team that Mark had and Alabama had and just missed. But there have been some good trips west. San Diego was not too kind 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whichever it was. I guess it would have been, it was 2 years ago because that was the year that JQ tore his knee up early against Notre Dame. But most of the history is pretty good out west. But I'm with you. I'd rather not go to Spokane for any time for any reason, but certainly not when you've got options in the Southeast that you could go to for first or second round games.
absolutely. And just one more question from me, and then we'll get Joey and Charles ask you some questions. So you said you've been the voice of Alabama basketball for 22 years, obviously been around Alabama basketball prior to that. For looking at, 10,000 feet up type of view, in my opinion, this era, the Nate Oates era, feels different than most prior coaches that we've had. Closest similarity that I would have was probably Wimp, but even now I think it's harder to win in this kind of NIL era, the transfer portal era, the media, everyone, social media, everything, right? Compare what Nate Oates has done in 5 years relative to what you've seen from prior coaches in maybe their first 5 years, or if the coach hasn't been there for 5 years, however X many years they've been there.
It's a great question. And, to me, Wimp would be the closest comparison. But I haven't looked at his record in those first 5 years. We know how great he was the last 5 and 6. You just knew you were going to be in the finals of the SEC tournament every year. I think it was an amazing – I may be off of this, but I really believe it was something like 9 or 10 years out of the 11 that he was head coach, he got to the finals of the SEC tournament, or at a minimum got to the weekend. Just incredible, the run that he had. They called it the Wimp Sanderson Invitational. I mean, his teams were phenomenal. And then you go to 5 Sweet 16s, 3 in a row. I know what we don't have on the resume in basketball. I know there's not a Final Four, and with that obviously means no national championship. But a tremendous number of wins in the SEC. Kentucky's in another stratosphere. Okay, there's no comparison. Kentucky's elite, but when you compare everybody else, Alabama has as many league wins or more than anybody else. They have, been a mainstay in the NCAA tournament. We had the dips for a few years in the stretch from the end of Mark's run. Anthony had 1 year in the NCAA tournament. Avery had a year. as well. But for Nate to get it back multiple years, it's a given. There's no bubble watch. I was watching, they were talking about projected last four in, first four out. And I was like, man, I do not miss. And it's not a shot at anybody. I don't mean this disrespectfully towards any coach or any of those players, but it's just not only as a fan, but as a broadcaster, it's so much fun to think about being a 3 or a 4 seed, or in last year's case, the number 1 national seed, as opposed to having to worry about the bubble and whether you're going to get in. So it's incredible what he's done. I don't think anybody's done in 5 years what he's done. You got to remember, forgive me, guys, coughs got me here. The COVID year cut it short, but that team was probably going to find a way to get into the postseason somewhere. And certainly they've been as good as anybody the last 3. Y'all keep talking. I'm grabbing a bottle of water while we visit. Okay, go ahead.
I agree. As Chris was just talking about it being the Wimp Sanderson Invitational previously, we all know that we now have Nashville Nate, so we like the tournament being
Nashville Nate. I love that.
Yes,
I love that.
That's what the people say, because Nate's never lost in Nashville. The one year that he did lose in the SEC championship, it was in Tampa. So he's never lost in the SEC championship in Nashville, or SEC
Good
tournament
point.
in Nashville. He's also never lost to Vanderbilt in Nashville as well. So we like to call him Nashville Nate around here.
That is very, very good. I haven't heard it, but it fits.
Well, and to your point about the COVID season cutting short, I will go a step further. We had Tennessee in that first game where we kind of let that one get away from us at home. We were up 20-something points. We were going to beat Tennessee in the first round. One of Kentucky's guards, the name escapes me, but he had basically just left the team or stepped away from the team, and we had played them really well at Rupp Arena. So I do think we were in position to make a run, and finally beat Kentucky in the SEC tournament. But to this date, as Alabama head coach, Nate Oates has not missed the tournament since there wasn't a tournament in that COVID season.
Yeah, that's true, and that's really nice to know you're going to be busy in March, and it's going to be busy somewhere in the NCAA tournament. Well, I had some great times and great moments, and the NIT gets a bad rap. It's not a bad tournament, especially when the Final Four was at Madison Square Garden. That was special, but your fans don't care, and I understand that because everything is now geared. The mindset is the NCAA tournament. That is clearly the goal. And that's the one you truly obviously want to be a part of. But it is nice to now be in that spot where you're not living life on the bubble. You're living it somewhere on a pretty high seed line, and hopefully this team's going to find a way to get a championship in the regular season, as they did a year ago, and then can keep momentum going and get into the conference tournament and win the thing, cut nets down in Nashville, as they've done the last couple of years as well.
And Joey, you said you had a question as well.
Yeah, it's kind of a great segue, Chris. You were talking about, you've had some, good moments in the tournaments, calling those games. And as as you said at the beginning of the podcast, talked about how, you've been covering this team for going on, just a little bit over 2 decades, I believe now. So you've covered a lot of games. So there's been a lot of moments. If you had to pick one, or maybe if you can't pick one, maybe 2 or 3, what was your favorite game to cover? What's the coolest thing that you've seen in person on the hardwood as you covered a game?
There have been a bunch.
Yeah, that's why I said 2 or 3, maybe.
there have been a bunch. But I've got to say, the first one was still one of the coolest, guys. And I've told this on different platforms before, but 2002, November, I think it was 16th, 2002. Alabama is coming off of the SEC championship season, where They won the regular season title. They lost a tough one in the conference tournament to Mississippi State. Irwin Dudley is the player of the year. Mo Williams is freshman of the year, and Mark was coach of the year. And everybody's back except for Rod Grizzard. And you're going to get Kennedy Winston, one of the top freshmen in the country, eligible at the Christmas break. So there was an awful lot to be excited about. There was a ton of excitement coming into the 02-03 season. Alabama was preseason number 8. Oklahoma is preseason number 3. They're playing game number 1 of that year at Madison Square Garden. And guess who's the new play-by-play guy? This guy. I'd never been to New York City. Guys, I grew up in Fairfield. I went to college at Montevallo. I'd been around Alabama athletics. I'd done some neat things in a 3-4 year window with Alabama athletics prior to that. But I'll never forget walking into the Garden, and we were game 2 of a doubleheader. Syracuse with Jim Boeheim was taking on Cal and Calipari in Memphis in the first game. And I've been telling people for 22 years now that Carmelo Anthony and I debuted at the Garden on the same night. That was his first game for Syracuse, first game as a college player, and things worked out a little better for him, certainly financially, but probably that night alone. But anyway, I'll never forget walking in, and I'm walking to my spot, and of course I'm there literally before tip-off of the first game because, number one, you don't want to be late, but second, I didn't want to miss. I wanted to see that game too. Well, guys, I walk into a suit, and I think the same bag that I'm using now, it still works. It looks good. But I walk in with that bag on my shoulder, and Dave Woloshin, who was and still is the play-by-play voice at Memphis, he's probably done Memphis games at least 30, maybe close to 40 years now. But Wolo, as we called him, and I knew each other from Memphis and UAB being in the same league, and I had done some work with UAB's broadcast over the years. So we knew each other, but he didn't know that I had gotten the Alabama job. Not a lot of people did, because it was only like about 6-7 weeks before the season started that I was officially announced as the new play-by-play guy. And guys, I walk in with the suit, the bag, and I'm clearly there to work, and they're literally about to tip off the game. And Wolo does a triple take, seeing me come and sitting about 3 seats down from him. And he kills the microphone, he takes the headset off, and he looks and he goes, "Chris, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Dave, I'm the voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide, and I am as stunned by that fact as you are." And he goes, "I'll talk to you at the next commercial." So he puts him on, calls the game, and it takes him on. He goes, "What?" And I fill him in as best you can during a 60-second commercial break. And I'll be honest with you, practically every time since then that I've walked into a building or at a stadium or wherever and put the headset on, it still blows my mind that I'm doing the play-by-play for Alabama. It's a childhood dream and incredibly special, but that one always stands out, always will. And there have been some really cool ones since then, but you don't ever top debuting at the Garden. That's pretty special.
That's great. I covered the team, as a writer for 5 years, but it was a great 5 years to cover, coming in at the end of the Avery Johnson campaign. And then of course being there for Oates, and, over the course of those 5 years, got to see a lot of really, really cool moments. But my favorite one over the past few years was, I mentioned this on our podcast from last week, was Herb Jones, with his wrist injured, shooting those one-arm free throws. And so that's kind of a segue into, what is probably your favorite moment, like on the court, like Herb Jones, What is your favorite moment of the Nate Oates era? You know, I know he's only been here for 4 or 5 years, but there's been a lot of moments like that I'm sure were a heck of a lot of fun to call.
It was amazing. That particular moment. It didn't get to last very long because if you remember, LSU comes down the other end of the court and hits a three immediately.
Yeah.
And as much as the fevered pitch was, it only lasted about 5 seconds, because they came in and immediately quieted. It was a great game that Alabama ultimately won, but that was an incredible moment. You're right. And, the line in the fight song, Bama's pluck and grit have writ her name in crimson flame. I don't know many of us fully understand exactly what that means, but if I've got any inkling of it and understanding it, I think it's Herb Jones personified in that moment. He just so tough, so amazing, offhand, one hand, in a clutch situation, hits two. And it was so special, but also LSU that year, the next year, I can't remember. They kind of run together, but I think it was that year where he, in the SEC tournament finale, is guarding Trendon Watford. LSU's got the final possession, 1 point Bama lead, and he blocks the shot. Now, they still almost got a tip in afterwards, but he gets the fingertip on that to block it. And with their best player and our best player, and he wins that battle. That was a great one. Reese's three that forced overtime against UCLA. Had we won that game, it's one and sends you to the Elite Eight. That's a game. That's a shot that they would, and I think they're still going to talk about it for a long time because of the importance of it in that moment. But for what it would have meant, we'd have talked about it forever, and really smiled about it. It is kind of like the Herb free throws. It was phenomenal. And then 5 seconds later, they've scored. Well, in this case, it's phenomenal. And then 5 minutes later, the season's over because we didn't get it done in OT. So a lot of downs, a lot more ups, but those are really special. Relaford's three, for what that meant, because that was a year where I talked about living life on the bubble. That's where we were. And if you lose that game at home, in the backstory on that, it was the final regular season home game. You've got to win it to stay alive in hopes of being in the NCAA tournament. And we didn't get in that year, which I think that team probably got robbed. Georgia got in, and I think we beat them twice in a week.
Yep.
And Georgia still got in over us with a very similar resume. But regardless, in that moment, he hits the three to win it. But if you remember, we were up 22, I think, early in the second half, and blew the lead in Georgia. It was also, by the way, the final home game of the regular season. All year long, we had been celebrating 100 years of Alabama basketball. And on that particular day, everybody that had ever played and ever coached or been a manager or was ever tied to the program in any way that was still living was invited back to be recognized. And they were all named at halftime. It was phenomenal. And we're up 20 at this point at the half. People are, it was fantastic. Well, now Georgia's got the ball in a tie game with a chance to win it. And they've called a timeout. And I'm sitting here going, not only are we not going to be in the tournament, we've blown this 22-point lead. So much for the celebration. And speaking of celebrations, all those people that I talked about that were being recognized, they were doing a program in the club level when the game was over. to recognize 100 years of Alabama basketball. And instead of a celebration, it was going to be more like a visitation at a funeral. And guess who was going to be the MC for said celebration / funeral? So when Charles Mann loses the ball because Nick Jacobs was in great defensive position, it winds up in Rodney Cooper's hands. He flips it to Trevor, who takes one look at the clock, 2 dribbles, and lets fly the most beautiful shot you've ever seen, because it was a shot. It wasn't a throw. It wasn't a chuck. I mean, he looked and in the most beautiful motion, shot it. The world stood still as that ball spun through the air. It goes through. The place exploded. I lost my ever-loving mind. And it turned out to be just amazing. And my son, who is now a freshman at the University of Alabama, I think was about 6, maybe 7 when that happened. And he memorized my call. And that summer he was at Anthony Grant's basketball camp. And he wanted to do the replay of my call, but him doing it for Coach Grant. And Coach Grant and Relly loved it. Their eyes got huge over the fact that he had all the detail memorized. And as his dad, that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool.
It's so funny that you mentioned calls, because I think one call that like is ingrained in my head is the Colin Sexton save the season call in the NCAA or in the SEC tournament, where you're like, it's good. Colin Sexton, man, just that's like one of my all-time calls. And the funny thing about that is I was sitting in my work, and I was not, like, it was dead quiet. And so I'm sitting with my phone on my computer while I'm watching it, because it's in the middle of the day. And I just have to stand up and just start fist bumping without making a single sound during that game, because I didn't want like everyone to freak out, because we had just won. And for like the first time in what seemed like forever, like we were going to the NCAA tournament, and it just felt like, I don't know, it was just like an outburst. But that's probably one of my favorite calls that you've ever had that I remember.
It means a lot to hear people's stories of where they were and that it meant something to them, because it's about the players, it's about the teams, but I get a chance to share the message of that with people like you who are fans. And in that moment, that's exactly what you were. You were a fan. And it's where you had to listen. It's where you had to get the information. And I got the privilege of sharing good news with you in that moment. And so that's really cool to hear that. But the Sexton, I remember being in the lobby of the hotel after that game and thinking, Colin, you made me famous, brother. I appreciate you. And that was, because again, as an announcer, you have no control over anything that happens. You just hope that you do the moment, you tell the story the right way, good or bad. Obviously, you're hoping that it's good, but you hope you tell the story properly, even when it's not, and that you get it right, and maybe it resonates with people. And that one did. And I got to tell this real quick. I don't know where we are on time, but amazingly, people would post that call afterwards. Oh, I thought we were going to lose Chris or whatever. Well, it's a month later. I literally did have a stroke. And it was the first of my health deals. 16 months after the stroke is when I had the bypass of the infection and almost checked out again. But I literally had a stroke a month later. But I haven't told this many places. I had the stroke on a Sunday night, Monday morning. I guess it was overnight. And I came home on Friday. It's a miracle that I survived it and all that. Y'all know the story, or if you don't, you probably don't care. But anyway, it's Aaron Jordan, who's in athletics communications and was the basketball contact at that time and a good friend. He said, hey, I want to bring you and your family dinner and got something else for you. I went, okay. Well, guys, he walks in and, he's got the food and all, and he hands me a Nike shoe box. So what is this? He goes, just open it. And I open it, and there's a signed picture from Colin, and there's a pair of his Nikes that he has signed to me as well. This is, I want to say, 2 weeks before the NBA draft. He walked into Aaron's office. Nobody on the staff prompted him. Nobody asked him anything. They said he walked into Aaron's office, had that shoebox and that picture, and said, I've heard about Chris. Can you please get this to him for me? And I'll be honest, I wasn't sure that Colin Sexton knew who I was at that point, because, so many people had been pulling at him. You knew he was one and done. And there were a lot of people that, and I never asked anything of him time-wise or anything else, but, I'd interviewed him 2 or 3, maybe 4 times, but not anything. We see each other on flights and in the team hotel or something, but there was never any extensive time. It blew me away that, one, he knew what was going on and would be that kind and that generous. I mean, my now 19-year-old freshman, or about to be 19-year-old freshman, has those shoes. I gave them to him. I wanted him to be able to enjoy them, but that's one of the reasons that, I'll never reveal my list of favorites, because it's a long one, and everybody's been great. And I mean that truly. In 22 years, I've never had a bad experience with a single kid, but Colin's right up there. There are a few that's on a special list that have nothing to do with basketball. Certainly Herb's on it and others, but guys, man, I am so blessed in so many ways. I get a chance to do what I do for a living, and I get to do it for the school that I've been a fan of since I was a kid. There's hardly any times where, there's a couple of years, but not many, where it wasn't living and dying on everything that happened for the Crimson Tide. And the fact that I get to be a messenger for Alabama now, in the primary, done a lot of sports for a lot of years, but and been involved with football almost that whole time. But to be in the seat that I'm in now, and filled in for Eli 2 years ago, and this past year when Greg made us play-by-play announcers, and I had the privilege of doing what I did, that I guess was my first official year. But to have all of the games now, plus continue to do basketball and a little bit of the baseball, just so blessed, so fortunate that, first of all, health-wise, I can do it, but also that I'm given the honor of doing that at a place like the University of Alabama. It's unreal.
So you actually answered, in a sense, one of the questions I was going to ask you, because I think, we were talking about calls and talking about you growing up as an Alabama fan. I think that's why us as fans resonate with your call so much, and I think it's fitting that you're on as right before we play Florida, because going back 2 weeks ago, listening to the courtside cam with you and Brian as we made our comeback, the end of the game, he's fouled, and just kind of letting it all out there. I think that's just what we all love about you being on the call, because you are so passionate. If you could dive into a little bit more, just how that passion grew as you were a kid cheering on the Crimson Tide.
Thanks, first of all. But I remember being 10 years old, sitting in the back seat of the car with my mom driving, listening to the Alabama-Mississippi State game in Jackson, 1980. I think Alabama had won 28 straight games. And John Bond and Mississippi State have got a lead over Alabama, and Don Jacobs is leading Alabama on the drive, and Alabama fumbles going inside the 15, maybe at the 10-yard line, and they lose. And I'm bawling like a baby. I'm 10 years old, but I'm crying like a baby in the back seat of the car. And fast forward, getting to meet and get to know John Forney and having him listen to a tape of mine in the early 90s, high school football game, and asking him to listen and critique, and not know if he ever really would or not, but to have him tell me, hey, Chris, call me a month later, I'm sorry it took so long to get back with you. You're John Forney, come on. And he was no longer doing the play-by-play at that time, but it was still the voice of my childhood. And for him to say, I think you're really good. I just think you need to get an opportunity. But you got an opportunity to be really, really good. And for what that meant to me, it's phenomenal. And he insisted I call him John. I never was comfortable with it. But getting to know him and to call him friend, then getting to know for the first time 17 years ago, well, actually, to go back, I met him by phone when I first got the basketball job. But Paul Kennedy, who followed John, he was only 29 years old and is brought in to follow John Forney. Even though Paul turned out to be terrific, it was not a popular move. Coach Bryant had just died. He had just retired, and then he passes away a month later. Ray Perkins, who had been hired as the next football coach, then gets named athletic director. And one of the first moves he makes is to change the official potato chip from Golden Flake to Frito-Lay, the official soft drink from Coke to Pepsi, took down Coach Bryant's practice tower where he viewed practice from, and also replaced John Forney with a 29-year-old guy who was doing Vanderbilt games. So poor Paul was not in the most popular of situations, no fault of his own, and yet was fantastic. It was great, had some dramatic calls during his time. Van Tiffin's kick, the last-minute drive, Mike Shula to Al Bell to beat Georgia in Athens on Labor Day in a season opener. Some other big calls, big games as well. And Paul has become a friend. He's somebody I've leaned on even recently, asking perspective of, following a legend and what that's like, and just terrific. And then, of course, Eli, and a legendary run that he's had where, I knew Eli Gold as a Birmingham Bulls hockey announcer, not knew him personally, but as a kid listening to Bulls hockey games in the old WHA. That's the first time he came to Birmingham, first time I heard him. I listened to him do Barons games. I saw him anchor Channel 6 when it was the ABC affiliate, and then became the voice of the Crimson Tide. I was never a big NASCAR fan, knew of the sport. I grew up on the western side of town. I grew up in Fairfield, and the Hueytown gang was a big deal, but I never really followed NASCAR, but knew certainly the importance and the magnitude of the role that Eli had. So when I got my first opportunity 24, 25 years ago, whatever it was, to first be a part of Alabama football broadcasts in some capacity, and, being a part of the team with Eli. And then certainly in the last 15 years, whether I was on sidelines or in the booth with him, and then being asked to fill in for him 2 years ago when he was ill, and then being given the shared responsibility with him on play-by-play this past season, and now being given the privilege of following him and being next. It's a great honor, and it's a great honor for two reasons. First and foremost, it's Alabama. It's the Crimson Tide. It's Alabama football, which is one of the most iconic names in all of sports, but certainly in all of college athletics. There's no name that's superior than the Crimson Tide. But also because of who John and Paul and Eli were and are as broadcasters. And of course, John's not with us anymore, but to have the privilege of knowing those men, and to be in a very small fraternity that they're in now, it's an incredible honor, and it's a great responsibility that I have as well.
So bringing up another memory moment, the night we just went wild in Baton Rouge against LSU set the SEC record for three-pointers made during the COVID season. You and Brian, and I'm assuming Tom, are calling the game from Baumhauer's. My brother Chris and I were fortunate enough to be there with y'all for that call. But I'm just curious, with that season, you're having to call road games, at restaurants. What did you learn about, how you want to call Alabama basketball games that you wouldn't have learned being in the arena? And what did you learn about the Alabama basketball fans that were showing not only to watch the game, but to listen to you call it and being a part of that atmosphere during that season?
Charles, that's a great question. And we were just talking about that tonight, because at dinner we were talking about that with Paul, about how challenging that was from a broadcast standpoint. And while we hope we never, ever have to go back and do that again, what a cool year that was. If we're 500 or sub 500, or, 5 games out of first, whatever, it's not as much fun. But that really was an enjoyable season from that standpoint for our broadcast. To, that particular LSU game you're talking about, there'd been some conversation about Will Wade, and I'll just leave it at that. And we're up so big late in the first half, and in reference to a recording on an FBI tape, Brian is talking about, well, Brian wasn't referencing it. Brian was just simply talking about how hot Alabama was. Roger Hoover, who was on the broadcast with us as well, brings us out of the commercial. You're laughing. You know where I'm going with this. Comes out of the commercial, sets Brian up, and we're talking about the run. And, we're up like 24 with 3.5 minutes to go in the first half. And if you remember the Will Wade deal, Brian's, talked about how good the team was, and I couldn't resist. I said, well, Brian, there's no way around it. It's just a strong ass start for the Crimson Tide. And when I said it, every one of y'all in the restaurant looked at me like, did he just say that? And then y'all all died laughing and went nuts. And I thought that was really cool. Might be the last game I ever work at Alabama. That turned out pretty good. But that was fun for a lot of reasons. Will was easy to pick on. But that was a very special deal. What I learned, it was not ideal in any way, shape, form, or fashion to call a game. There's so much more that we really need to see and want to see, and you're at the mercy of the producers. And when they may cut away, imagine somebody controlling your eyeballs for you. That's what it is, because I was what I could see was under the control of somebody else. But what I did learn in that, and I tell young broadcasters, aspiring broadcasters, whatever, any people that just ask in general about the profession, you say what you see. That's what you do. You're telling a story, but you say, especially on radio, you simply say what you see. Score time, down and distance in football, those are the most important elements. Basketball, score time, ball position. Every sport has its own unique set of things that would fall into that category. But say what you see is the main thing. And you didn't like not being able to see much, but that premise didn't change. You're just limited by what you could see, but you simply do still say what you see. And we were fortunate. People had some grace for us, knowing that we were limited in that regard. We did get to share that with them, beating Mississippi State in Starkville. But we called, well, that was the clinching game for the SEC title, and got to enjoy that with Alabama fans at Baumhauer's. Called the game. People were celebrating inside the restaurant. And I've always seen these clips for Alabama wins inside restaurants and the eruption and all. I wondered what that might truly be like. And you go, man, I know I've got a phenomenal opportunity being here at the game, but it sure would be cool to be back and be a part of that celebration. I kind of got both with that in that particular day. And then we ate, and when it was over, we went and met the team bus. It arrived back at Coleman Coliseum. We got to be there. I always think about Fluff riding in. He got there just ahead of the bus. He drove back, and it was the hero's welcome for him, which certainly in retrospect was amazing and even more meaningful and sentimental. And then I can neither confirm nor deny that there may have been a continuing celebration that transpired at Innisfree later. I can neither confirm nor deny such, but it was a really cool night, really cool experience. That the broadcast being done in that fashion did build a connection even further, I think, with the fans, because you truly got to watch it with them that year. It was special.
So
Don't ever want to do it again, but it was special.
So if I can brag on you a little bit, because you just talked about, you call what you see. We were playing Clemson in the Hoops Giving in Atlanta, and the feed goes out, and I'm having to listen to you and Brian try to call the game off of noise from the arena, and I guess the box score just refreshing, and being an ESPN box score, it was having some of its issues as well. So just to know we got the best in the business in crimson and white, that's just another example of it. I've got two more questions.
Nice.
I'll try to do it quick. You've pretty much had a front row seat to how the culture. You talked about the Georgia game with Coach Grant. Now, I think Coach Grant has done a phenomenal job at Dayton. I think he helped in getting us to where we did, of just building the program back in a certain sense in some areas. But under him and Coach Johnson, we had an inability at times to close games. And that was one of the things that the culture needed to change. Is there any games or moments under Coach Oates that you can sit back and say, you know what, we're a team, we're a program that everybody else is going to have to deal with for years to come, and the culture has changed?
Arkansas last year, Fayetteville. Arkansas has climbed back from down 12 to within 2 with about 3 minutes to go, maybe 3.5. I can't remember exactly, but it's not much time. And, they got a phenomenal building, loud, packed, grown people making pig noises. It is absolutely at a fevered pitch. And we got the ball. They're thinking, let's get one more stop, go get it the other way, tie it or take the lead. And Noah Clowney hits a 3. from somewhere between the corner and the wing, and it ends the run. We go to the other end of the floor. They lose it out of bounds. We come back. Brandon Miller hits a three. They hurry the other end of the floor, get a takeaway, ball deflected. Sears comes out with it, brings it front court, I think to the top of the arc himself, and whips a pass with his left hand. I'm still not sure how he did it, but whips this pass over to Brandon on the right wing. Catch, shoot, three, bottom, and I lost my mind because they call timeout.
Daggers to the pigs.
I still don't know where that came from. Those were because there's occasion I'd call them the pig people and pigs, but three in a row, and I'm thinking those were daggers. Those shots are just daggers to them, and immediately it comes out afterward to the pigs, and that sometimes you get lucky, and I got lucky there, but it was such a special series, and it's over. I mean, it's gone from 12 down to slowly, I should say, down to 2, and now it's at 11, and it's over. Game, set, match, Ms. Navratilova. It's done, and folks are heading for the exits, and that was a very pleasant final minute there at Bud Walton. It really was, and that to me said, that team was not going to let it happen. They were not going to lose to that squad, and that's when I knew there's just no way anybody's going to beat this team for an SEC title. They were the best.
So sorry,
go
go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, just last question. And I think we're going to have Brian on next week. Is that right, Christian?
Yeah.
Why are you having me on then if you got Brian? You don't need me if you got Brian.
Well, I'm going to ask him this question too, and I think it's appropriate coming off of last week's games. Look, we know we don't ever get any bad officiating calls, but I'm just curious if one ever happened to go against us. Are you having to calm down Brian? Is Brian having to calm down you? Or is it the dark horse that you and Brian are having to calm down Tom Stipe right next to you?
We're at Tom's mercy. And I forget sometimes that we're on Facebook Live, and I've said that'll be the death of me yet. But normally, I'm able to reel myself in pretty quick. Brian gets to be more of a fan. And now the webcam reveals we're not – I can tell you this with 100% honesty and sincerity. There ain't one thing we've done playing to the camera, because I forget that it's on. The fist bumps we apparently were doing forever and never even noticed until Ethan Carabin started managing that for the network and putting it on. And we're like, good night. It's like every made dadgum basket. But we're two friends watching a game. We really are. I mean, we've got a job to do. But in that sense, really, we're two fans. In his case, a former player. He's got the double deal. He's an alum of the university and a former player, as well as being a broadcaster. So yeah, we care. It matters to us. It's so much more pleasant. We're around the team, and then we go out places, and there are people that say stuff to us about the team that they would never say directly to the team. And that's part of being an announcer, good and bad, because you have to bite your tongue a lot on stuff that people may say. Because even if you agree to a slight degree, you're not going to bash your own kids. You're not going to bash the staff that you're often become friends with. And often the fans, they're upset because you've lost, but often what they say is just completely wrong. I'm not, man, I get it. It's emotion. I'm not dogging them for it. I'm just saying that happens because it's not about logic. It's about emotion at that time. And like, it's okay to be upset, but you're completely wrong about why we lost, but you can't say anything. You just smile or shake your head and go, yeah, I know. But, oh man, again, I say it all the time. These guys, there's no way I'd want the responsibility of calling a game. It's an incredibly tough job. Those guys get the overwhelming majority of them right, except for one or two guys I can name. But anyway, they want to get it right. I know that. There's not one guy that's sitting here trying to get it wrong. I get it. But at the same time, the outcome affects my income, or it used to. The more games we won, the more games I got to call, so the more I got paid. And I'm not seeing, I do the first or second day of the SEC tournament. If we're not playing, I'll do one of the games for the SEC radio network. It's owned by Learfield, which owns the Crimson Tide Sports Network. And they give the opportunity to guys like me and others that have been around a while. They give us a chance to do a game, which is really fun because they'll pair us with another color analyst that we don't normally work with. So it's like me and Richard Williams from Mississippi State have done 2 or 3 games together over the years. Tim Thompson from Vanderbilt has become a friend. We did a game together last year on this. And it's cool because you don't have a dog in the hunt. Your team's not playing. You have some familiarity with the team because your squad's played them. You've probably seen them multiple times on television. It's another professional, but somebody you don't normally work with. So that's kind of new. We have a really good time. But it's amazing how much better I think the officials are when I'm calling a game where the outcome doesn't matter to me whatsoever. But when I'm calling one and the outcome matters to me, you better believe I see it through a different filter. Now, if I'm bashing a guy and I'm getting, I'm saying that he's, drowns puppies and is against Christmas and everything like that, then, okay, I'm carrying it too far, and you never want to see it get personal. But in the heat of the moment, it happens. Not always my best moments, not always something I'm proud of. I hope it never crosses a line. But there's an intensity level that comes with caring. And when you have passion about the outcome and you have passion for the team and you have personal relationships with coaches or players, while I have a responsibility to be professional, that's all. I'm human and I'm going to fail. I do it a lot of ways every day. So occasionally in my job, it's not going to be much different, but I try to minimize it anyway. Try to save it for big moments that really matter.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, I don't think we have any more questions for you. Wow, that's really good. It's really good. I love the stories and just hearing like your perspective from things, because like you said, like for a lot of us, like there's times where clips will happen where we hit a big shot, or like the Brandon Miller last year block into a 3 where Sears is swinging it to him in Birmingham. And I just sit waiting for someone to clip the video with your voice on top of it so that we can like just kind of relish in the type of calls that you're giving us. And just super happy to have you also do football. Obviously respect Eli tremendously, that he's a true Alabama legend, but much like the Nick Saban was a true Alabama legend, and obviously will be remembered forever. It's sometimes it's good to see what's on the horizon in a new era, and we're definitely entering that with obviously DeBoer, and then it's just funny how timing works, where you get Chris Stewart now, the voice of Alabama football, and you get Kalen DeBoer, the new head football coach. So, and I'm not sure.
Well, I appreciate it, but I will say that real quick. Sorry to interrupt you, but I will say simply, it'll be amazing how much better people think I am if he wins a bunch of games. It's just crazy how that works. So you better believe, outside of his wife, ain't nobody pulling for him more than I am. I promise you that.
And if they lose a bunch of games, then we know who we're blaming. Then I guess
it's my fault completely. Shoot the messenger.
So, and I'm not sure if you know this, but we're also sponsored by J&J, which J&J has your shirt out, the Let's Get Out of Here. Hopefully that continues to be a thing going into football and obviously continuing with basketball. But for everyone listening, be sure to go pick up Chris's shirt from J&J if you're going to go purchase something. Also, you can purchase some of our merch that we're wearing. I got the Tide Hoops, obviously Block
Very
A,
nice.
and then the Roll Tide. But Chris, is there anything you want to say in closing for anyone listening?
No, I appreciate you guys having me. I appreciate your passion for Alabama that you guys have, and the job you do in giving an outlet for fans to kind of come together and get more Alabama content and info, such as what you provide. I'm flattered you'd asked me to be a part of it, and I really enjoyed getting the chance to visit with you. And anytime you need me, please let me know.
Will do. And that was Chris Stewart, everybody. Thank you. We want to thank Chris for jumping in and talking to us. I mean, this podcast is going to be a little bit longer than normal, but I mean, they're just some amazing stories, just about him growing up as an Alabama fan, and then obviously the last 22 years of him being the voice of Alabama basketball. It's quite the honor to have him on the podcast and for us to be able to share that time with him. So we really appreciate him jumping in and while he's in Gainesville and he's got a game tomorrow, or I guess when this comes out today. But let's jump into it, guys. I think a lot of people outside of wanting to hear Chris Stewart have probably come here for one reason, or probably two reasons. The first one is let's revisit Saturday. I first want to start with College Game Day. Joey and I were fortunate enough to be able to cover College Game Day. For me, not necessarily for Joey, this was the first time for me to be a credentialed media member. And it was such an awesome and surreal experience. I got to speak with some people that I never thought I'd be able to have like honest conversations with. Got to get on the court and cover College Game Day for Alabama basketball, and the environment, and the credit to the fans that came out and the students especially that came out. My takeaway from all of it was that little amount of people made that arena seem so loud because of how they positioned the students and how they positioned like where it was on TV. If that's not an indication of maybe there should be a change to the student section, then I don't know what is. Because if you just had those two sections or those three sections filled with students, the environment in Coleman would be like absolutely, it would be like it was Saturday night. Additionally, I hope that and like Chris said, it's never seemed to align with Alabama as far as good game, College Game Day. I hope with the new teams coming in to the SEC that we get more big time Saturday games that allows us to maybe host College Game Day more in the future. What about you guys?
For goodness sake, can we please have Auburn on Saturdays, both home and away? Please stop putting those on Tuesday, Wednesday nights. But no, my takeaways, Christian, were the same as yours. I mean, we talked about it on the court about how, the students being lined up, there on the edge. It didn't matter where you were on the court. It was really loud. And credit to the fans that did show up. They did an excellent job. It really shows how not just how effective Coleman could be, even if the students were just realigned, but also it shows how effective a new arena would be in making it such a completely different environment and just so much more hostile. And no matter, right now, obviously, if you're on one end of the floor, the students can still be loud, but it's obviously a lot louder at the other end. So, but it was an incredible experience. Like you said, it was your first time wearing a credential and walking around. For me, that was something I was used to, but it was the first, time I'd done that in a year. And just being able to do that again, get to walk around and, bump shoulders with people. And, I know, we talked to Greg Byrne for a little bit, obviously talked to people on the beat and some other people there. It was just a really great experience. And it really shows the amount of progress that this program has been. And I'm sure they would have come to an Alabama game, more recent or, earlier than they have, but like you said, the schedule, but regardless, Alabama being on the national stage for the first time, as far as game day is concerned, was just something special and something historic. And it's something that I won't, ever forget. And it's hopefully something that, 5 years from now, it'll be monotonous. The game day will be in Tuscaloosa so much, but yeah, it was a significant day. And day started out great, didn't end so great, but I'm sure we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, as Chris said when he was with us, everything about that day, and I would even say that weekend, Friday and Saturday, everything was great except maybe the most important part, which was getting the result. And even that was great, 35 minutes. I did not have the opportunity to join y'all Saturday, but was with y'all, of course, Friday when we were filming in Coleman Coliseum. And that was a cool experience. The atmosphere just around Tuscaloosa during the day when I did get there in the afternoon and we were downtown and going to different restaurants and different bars. It was a big game atmosphere that we'd never really experienced for a basketball game. People were down there for that purpose, of course, and trying to get there as soon as they could to fill the arena and to start, the electricity as far as what the crowd was going to give for that game early on. So it's been, tough, I feel like, because there is a part of last weekend that really needs to be celebrated and enjoyed by Alabama basketball fans. And there's part of that too where I don't want to sit here and just, enjoy the moral victory of that. And some of that just comes with what has been built by Coach Oates and by the athletic department and the players, of just not wanting to settle for, just being there. Like, we want to be there and we want to own the moment as well. And so I personally have had a hard time as far as, being really happy, but also being disappointed about the game, which we'll get into in a little bit. But overall, I have to take a step back, and I hope others take a step back too, of just everything that we've been through over the past decade and a half of Alabama basketball, and sticking with it and loving this program. And no matter who was at the helm or who was playing for us, just trying to get our full support give our full support for them. That patience and that fandom, I feel like in a sense was rewarded with what Saturday was leading up to the game, and then of course parts of the game as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just say this real fast about that. If you were there for the 13 and 18 season, and if you were there for the loss at Norfolk State, like, that was one of those that Saturday was one of those things that felt for me, being around all of that during that time, it was a surreal moment, especially like we were at Innisfree, and I can't tell you how many people came up to me and they said, "Are you going to the game?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're going to the game." And they said, "Man, I really wish I could go." Right. And that's not like, they're like, "Oh, I wish I had tickets to go," or, "Oh, I really wish I could go, but I can't," or like, "I know that's going to be so fun." Like, that's the type of stuff that, like, you normally only see in Tuscaloosa around college football during football season. And I know the crowd probably it wasn't as large. Obviously, there, you don't have an influx of 100 and 150,000 people into Tuscaloosa for basketball, obviously. But it really did sense, you could, like you said, you could sense some type of electricity. There was kind of like just an energy within Tuscaloosa that that I don't think I've seen or felt since I've been, going to games in Tuscaloosa.
Well, not to be ironic, but it was a game day atmosphere. Like, that's what it felt like. It felt like a college game day. It wasn't just, oh, I'm getting to Coleman 30 minutes before tip and then leaving 30 minutes after. Like, it wasn't an event. It was a weekend. And I think that hopefully that gave a lot of people a taste of, and a lot of more people will be coming back for that kind of stuff next year, even if they are playing Norfolk State or something like that. But no, it was I don't want to use the word magical, but it almost was. Like it was really close to feeling that way. And that's the first time I've ever felt it that way about a basketball game in Coleman, as far as just, it wasn't one person that was feeling that. It was the 15,000 people that were inside that day.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, Alabama doesn't come away. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Alabama doesn't come away with the result that we want. I think that just my personal takeaways from the game, Alabama finished the first half about as well as you could have hoped. Came out in the second half at the beginning, really put it to Tennessee. Got the lead up to 7 or 8. I can't remember the number. And it felt like once that happened, Alabama, it felt like the San Diego State game from last year is my best comparison, where Alabama spent so much energy to stay in the game and to get to I think in San Diego State, we had an 8 or 9 point lead, get to that lead. And then all of a sudden, San Diego State is like, we're still going to be playing, but Alabama spent so much energy to get to that point that they didn't have the horses to, keep up the intensity. And ultimately, Alabama loses by 7. I think it was a lot closer than a 7-point game. Tennessee was shot, I think, like 4 consecutive free throws down the stretch to put it within like a 7-point game. But I think you feel the loss of Latrell Wrightsell. Mark Sears has played, what was it, 79 of 80 minutes in the last week. Aaron Estrada is playing 35 plus minutes a game. You see kind of the emergence of Davin Cosby, but he only plays 10 minutes. And then outside of that, you don't really have any more guards. I mean, Ryland's there, but he's not really a guy that you're hoping to run the offense through, even though that did happen sometime at the end of the game. And I think that was in large part due to the fact that Wrightsell and Estrada were just so tired from the physicality of the game. But I do want to speak on quickly just my thoughts. The defense, I think, was improved. That was the lowest percentage that we've allowed in SEC play since the South Carolina game, as far as an offensive or defensive percentage allowed, or offensive percentage allowed. Sorry. And at the end of the day, when you go 9 minutes without scoring a field goal, you're not going to win very many basketball games. And I think that's just the moral of the story for the game on Saturday for me.
Yeah, for me, there was a lot of stuff going on in that game. Just off the top of my head, I can think about, we've been talking about how Bama, particularly in Coleman, has done better with the turnover battle, and they still only gave up 12. But when you give up 12 compared to 6, and Tennessee's able to convert that to 17 points compared to Bama just getting 9 off of turnovers, I mean, that's the difference in the game right there. That's 8 points compared to the 7 that Bama lost by. So, I agree with you, Christian. I thought the defense played a lot better. I mean, they held them to Tennessee. While obviously they won by 7, they really shot pretty poorly from the floor. I mean, they only shot 36% on the day. They were 30% from 3, which was another. They didn't do terrible there. They did it 12 for 40, which was a big difference. But overall, if you're looking out, I was looking here at the stats right here and looking at this at the shooting, and I remember looking at it in the game in the second half from the 14-minute mark all the way to, I think it was 1:14 left in the game. Bama only hit 1 basket that entire stretch. The team played, as opposed to their first half, they played a lot more disjointed in the second half. They were making a lot more mistakes. Shots weren't falling, and unfortunately, or we've seen over the course of this season, they've gotten pretty well at still playing solid defense, even when the offensive end of the floor isn't working out for them. But in this game, you started to see that slacken off just a little bit, and just that little bit of give was what gave Tennessee that push to kind of overtake them at the end, and obviously score those. I think they scored 6 free throws in the final minute or so to really take that potential victory from potential defeat from the jaws of victory. But anyways, it was a not the game you wanted to see. I do like the way the defense is going, but they're going to need all the help they can get against Florida if they don't respond after that loss. This is a Florida team that I know Chris was talking, he was talking about how, he thinks it's a good thing that Florida, also lost. So we're kind of on even footing coming into this game. I understand that opinion, but then for me personally, also with the season that Florida's had, it's very, very important that they get a win for their seeding in the SEC tournament. So I really hope once again that I'm wrong, but I also wasn't wrong about the Tennessee game.
Yeah, I want to start my comments about the Tennessee game about Nick Pringle. Nick Pringle has been under a lot of scrutiny this year. Some fair, some unfair, I believe. His play over the past couple of weeks has just continued to improve and has been somebody that I hope we can continue to rely on the rest of the way. We talked about how this team struggles sometimes with physicality. I thought he brought it for all 25 minutes that he was in the game. 9 rebounds, only 1 turnover, 13 points. And what was the part that was so impressive to me about Nick, he's obviously got, a different way to shoot free throws. And when he was going to the line, those were pressure-packed moments where Tennessee had taken the lead in the second half. And he goes to the line, and he goes 5 of 6. I'm just incredibly impressed, proud of him as far as what he did in that game and having some big moments. And I obviously really hope for our team, but for him as well, that he can just continue to get better, continue and improve, and really finish this season on a strong note, because he was huge Saturday night. And I think if we had pulled that game out, you'd hear a lot more people talking about him. When I think about how the game was played, and I think we talked a little bit about this on Friday when we were in Coleman, just as far as the emotions of the game and, how do you kind of take a knockout punch, and especially for us as a team, some of the runs that we kind of go on. And I'll go through some of our runs first. We're down 29-39 with about 4 minutes left before halftime. And as Christian said, we could not have ended the first half better. We go on a 12-0 run. It's 41-39. But then, going into halftime, as well as the fans do, as when you come out of halftime to keep the energy going, it was kind of like Tennessee getting saved at the bell when you got them in a corner and it gets to halftime. You think about Nelson's 3 when he hit it to go to 46-40. We were starting to get some momentum, and then they also had some big plays there that I'll get to in just a second. But the key one was definitely when it was 49-48. Estrada hits a 3. Officials stopped the play for a clock issue. It wasn't malicious. It's something that they've got to do. I think we come down and Sears gets dropped past to Nick Pringle, and it's 53-49. Vescovi comes down with 15:27 left and gets a layup. So it's 53-51. And then they don't score another basket. They don't make another field goal for the next 4.5 minutes, except for one Adu free throw during that time. And we score only 5 points during that entire time. It was a Sam Walters layup, and it was Sam Walters hitting 3 free throws, which credit to Sam for going to the line and hitting all 3 free throws. But that's just a different reaction to hitting 3 free throws than to burying a 3-pointer in the corner and keeping the game going and keeping the crowd alive. That was just some of the things as far as, when we're trying to deliver a knockout punch, it just didn't hit as hard as I felt like we really wanted it to. On the flip side for Tennessee, we cut it 30-29. Sears is going to free throw line, shooting 1-and-1. He misses the first one. I think we come down and Nick Pringle picks up his second foul. They hit 2 free throws. It's 32-29. put Nick in the ball screen action. He gets an offensive foul. So now he's going to the bench with 3 fouls. Come down, Connect gets fouled. He hits the first free throw, misses the second. They get the offensive rebound and hit a 3-pointer, and we call it timeout. So they get a 4-point play. That was a tough moment in the game. But as we just talked about how we finished the first half, you fought back and you had the lead. You fought through that attempted knockout punch. As I mentioned, Nelson hits the 3, it's 46-40, and then the next 3 Tennessee possessions, they hit 3-pointers. I think Sears got caught going underneath a screen, so Ziegler hit a 3. We have a turnover. Estrada gets caught in a screen. Vescovy hits a 3, and then Dalton Connect hit a 3 with Well, and that was kind of a gut punch. That, again, I thought we answered very well, and that's when we got our biggest lead, 58-51, which I think should have been bigger during that time, which we just talked about. But then the last one, Nelson picks up his 5th foul in the ball screen action on offense. I'm not going to say it was a good call, but I'm also not going to say it was a bad call. It was a tough call, obviously, for us in that situation. They come down, miss a shot, get an offensive rebound. Meshack hits the 3. They go up 63-62. He runs across the court as Sears is trying to pass it up to Estrada. Makes a great play to keep his feet in bounds, gets it to Ziegler. Ziegler gets it to Adu. He scores for an and one opportunity. It's 65-62, and you could kind of just feel, the air being sucked out of the gym at that point. And you could kind of look at some of our guys too at that point, where we've talked about they haven't been too high, they haven't been too low. You could just kind of see it on some of their faces that they were gassed and maybe some questioning as far as, can we get back into this game? But they continued to fight. They continued to play. And you got to be very proud of that effort. But when I go back and think about those 3 stretches for Tennessee, those were emotional, physical gut punches that, unfortunately, at the end of the day, we just weren't able to overcome. The defense, as you mentioned, I think the defense was improved. But one of the things that I feel like I've noticed about our defense, both in the Tennessee game and the Kentucky game, and Charles Bediako gets a lot of talk about, we don't have a rim protector or things like that. I think it's more of just we don't have the length, of course, that we had last year. When we've got a guy who's off ball on the backside and he's got his foot in the paint trying to protect the paint, but he's got a shooter on the other side, and, ball side makes a drive into the paint, he collapses down, they kick out. We just don't necessarily have the quickness or the length to alter shots like we did last year. And I think that was kind of evident too on the play where we try to double connect in the corner. They make 3 quick passes, either to Josiah Jordan-James or Meshack again, and he gets off a 3-pointer where our guys just, a step or 2 slow in getting back to him. Where if we have the length, it's probably a little bit faster recovery. Especially, looking back at this year, that it's just something that, you can't coach length. But I do think the team is continuing to improve. I think they grew up a little bit as well. And so there are some positives to take away from the game. But one thing that I do think we need to see from guys like Rylan Griffin and Stevenson and Sam Walters is not trying to hit 2 or 3 3-pointers with just 1 shot. We've gotten to rushing our shots a little bit, trying to do too much. Coach Oates always talks about just lose yourself in the game. And I think we need some of our guys to just get back and lose themselves in the game, and the shots will come to them. That's what Rylan did in the second half against Ole Miss. That's when Stevenson was hitting shots that he did, it's much smoother than what it is now. And I think about when Sam Walters was hitting his 3s against Florida, that he just lost himself in the game. So disappointing. Tennessee's a very good team. It was a great atmosphere. It was a great game. Hopefully there's an opportunity, to pull it out, whether it's an outright SEC championship or meeting them in the SEC tournament. But still feel encouraged about this team as we get into March, and obviously just want to get healthy these next 2 games as we get into the SEC tournament as well.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of talk is about Reitzel being out. And I think he's one of those guys that is like that veteran, experienced guy that between him, Mark Sears and Rylan Griffin, they've had real chances this season to deliver those type of knockout three pointers throughout the season. And obviously with Sears playing majority of the minutes, that it wasn't going to fall on him. I think Rylan had a tough game. And you really needed a guy like a Reitzel to be there and calm the guys down and allow them and just step up and hit a shot when it needed to be hit. There were a lot of opportunities. I know Oates has talked about shot selection. A lot of those shots, while they weren't great, were wide open. Rylan, I mean, down the stretch had 3-3-pointers that were clean looks that just hit the front rim and bounced out. And it's just playing within the system, playing within the offense. And I think at times Alabama got away from that on Saturday. But, you got to move forward. You got Florida up next, which since this is coming out on Tuesday is tonight. And they're no pushover team. Florida's a very, very good team. I know they dropped out of the top 25 this week, but they took Alabama to overtime in Coleman last time that we played. And if Reitzel's not playing, which at the time of recording, we don't know whether or not he is or is not playing, I think it's going to be tough for Alabama. It's senior night for Florida. It's prime time. They're going to look to get revenge, not only for the game a couple weeks ago, but additionally for the game that they lost over the weekend to South Carolina. And that was a tough game as well. So there's no cupcakes for Alabama the rest of the way. Heck, even Arkansas took Kentucky to the wire on Saturday, who we played on this weekend. So this is winning time for Alabama. This is championship time for Alabama. How you respond to the game on Saturday determines whether or not you have the mental fortitude to be able to get to the goals and get to the aspirations that you want, which is SEC championship, SEC tournament championship, and hopefully a deep run in the NCAA. So really looking forward to seeing how this team kind of, like you said, grows up and responds to adversity, because that's what Alabama has right now. It's adversity.
And for this team and this program, if you go all the way back to 2022, when we lost to Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament, that's 38 SEC games where in 37 of them, you controlled your own destiny to either win the SEC regular season or win the SEC tournament. The one game out of that 38 that you didn't was the Texas A&M game last year, because you'd already won the SEC regular season. So that one just kind of stuck out to me of the impressive run that we've been as far as just controlling the SEC over the past basically 2 years. But just the mindset too, as well as you're playing still for the opportunity to win the SEC, whether it's getting a share or winning it outright if things really go your way. But you don't control your own destiny anymore. And you're coming off a very tough game with a lot of emotion, as we talked about throughout the weekend. And like you said, Florida's coming off a game where they had, I think, an 11-point lead at South Carolina, and they end up, losing by 6. At some point in this game tomorrow or tonight, even if Florida gets off to a good start, there's going to be an opportunity to get back in this game, because that's just what Florida has done all year. When Missouri came into town to Florida just last week, they had an 11-point lead against them, and that game was tied in the second half. They beat LSU at home 82-80. The Vanderbilt, they ended up winning by 13, but they were up as much as 22 in that game. They have struggled to hold on to leads, but also when they've been down, like when they were at Kentucky and when I believe they were on the road at Georgia, they have also fought back in a lot of games as well. emotions, I think, are going to play a lot more in this game than what we've seen all year. Obviously, this is the time of year when you get to your senior night festivities. So how focused are some of their guys on the game? How focused are we coming into the game, knowing with what we dealt with last week? And I think for Florida too, can emotions make you play out of control, knowing that you probably gave a game away to us in Tuscaloosa, and do you try to make up for that game by taking shots or playing too fast when you shouldn't be? But I think it's going to be, for the casual basketball fan, it should be another fun, exciting game. I thought the first game was very fun and exciting. It's both teams that play really, really fast. It's both teams that like to score the basketball and don't really play a whole lot of defense. So it should be a quality game, and a fun night, and hopefully it's a game that we can go ahead and just wrap up at minimum the 2 seed in the SEC tournament, which is something to be proud about as well for this program that hasn't, unless we've won the SEC, we haven't had a double bye since 2013. So even though it's not the ultimate championship, there's still something to be proud of and to feel accomplished as far as getting a double bye, because you want that if you're going to have an opportunity to win the SEC tournament. So we're going to get challenged on all levels of the floor, at all positions. They've got a very good team, as we've talked about. I think they're a sneaky team, not only for the SEC tournament, but the NCAA tournament. And I'm very excited to watch the game and see how we respond tonight.
Joe, you have any thoughts on the Florida game?
Sorry, my brain was about 12,000 miles away. No, this is this is a Florida team that Charles kind of took the point that I was going to make about how this is a Florida team that is very capable of giving up leads, but they're just equally as capable of fighting back and staying in whatever situation they're in. We saw that in multiple ways in the first matchup in Coleman, going to overtime. I think a lot of people have forgotten, a lot of Alabama fans kind of dismissed Florida after the Florida game. But people forget that they're still, the primary focus of people this season has been obviously on Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, and Auburn. Those have been the 4 teams, but Florida has been quietly just circling back and forth just outside those 4 teams. This is a very dangerous team. Look at them on Ken Palm. They're 15th in the country in offense on Ken Palm. They have a really, really stout offense. And I know this isn't really saying much, but they're also ranked higher than Alabama in defense. They're 88th. So combine all that with the emotions you were mentioning, Charles, in this game being played, at Florida. This is a game that I've been saying the past few weeks is if Bama was going to lose one, this would be the game they'd lose. So, I'm not going to go through and point out specific players because we kind of already went through that on a previous podcast, but they have a lot of weapons. They have a lot of talent. There's a reason Florida is such a storied program. They've got a lot going for them. And while the hype around them hasn't been as high this year as it has in years past, this is still a very dangerous basketball team. And it's going to be a lot of fun, though. It'd be huge if Bama could get a win and then finish the season with a win against Arkansas to close out and get some momentum heading into March, because I think we're starting to get to the point where Alabama needs to find some sort of rhythm and some sort of momentum heading into the SEC tournament, because if they drop this one and they beat Arkansas, yes, that'd be nice to have the Arkansas game, but they wouldn't have had any consistent wins heading into the tournament to light a fire under their butts. So hopefully they'll be able to do that tonight, not tomorrow night, but tonight in Gainesville. And then hopefully we'll be, grinning heading into Saturday and then heading into tournament week, which I think also one of the reasons my head was 12,000 miles away is because it kind of finally just hit me about 5 minutes ago that the SEC tournament's next week. I've known it's been on the calendar. I've known it's next week, but it really finally hit me. It's freaking March, y'all. So let's get excited.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of crazy to think about that. I feel like the basketball season's kind of flown by. And I guess that comes with with the territory of doing this, where it feels like we're doing something every other night or so. But I going into, so we talked about Florida. Let's just briefly talk about Arkansas for those of you guys listening. we're not really going to touch on Arkansas like as a preview. Well, just because one, this podcast is probably going to end up being an hour and a half long. And two, I think that it's important to talk about the Arkansas game after the outcome of the games, I guess tonight. It's almost tonight for me because it's 11:40 p.m. But after the outcome of the game, win or lose for Alabama, and then obviously the South Carolina Tennessee game. So we're going to be probably deep diving in that following the Florida game in the post game space, just talking about Arkansas. And additionally, want to just mention for Arkansas that it is a Crimson Out. It is senior night. I don't know what all seniors are going to be honored. I would assume that Aaron Estrada is going to be honored as he runs out of eligibility after this year. But Alabama has a lot of guys that have one more year of eligibility left. So I'm not entirely sure as far as seniors are concerned, what that looks like as far as the guys being honored. But it is a Crimson Out, so wear crimson. I would assume that Alabama is going to wear crimson jerseys. And I think that's the first day of spring break. So I do know for the student section that they did reduce the amount of tickets that the students have. And so there are tickets available, even though it was previously announced as a sellout. There are tickets available up in the student section area available for purchase. So buy those up, support the guys on the last home game of the season. And one thing I want to mention for people listening is, regardless of the result tonight, and regardless of the result on Saturday, we always level set at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of the conference play, and in SEC play, where sorry, my wife just came in and just scared the crap out of me. I literally just jumped. We always try to level set the season and kind of confidence and predictions. And I do remember that in December when we talked about this on the space, and it might have been in a podcast too. The prediction that I at least personally had, and I think Charles, you had a similar one.
Yep.
And Joey, you as well, was Alabama was going to finish 12-6 or 13-5 in the SEC, get to 20 or 21 wins before the SEC tournament, and that would likely have made Alabama a 5 or 6 seed in the SEC or NCAA tournament. At this point in time of recording, at 11:43 p.m., with 2 games left in the regular season, Alabama is sitting at what, 11-3?
12-4 right now, 20-9 overall.
12-4 in the SEC, 20-9 overall. So Alabama's already hit the 20-win threshold. And we all said at the beginning of the SEC play that 13-5 would be a good season for Alabama. Now, this isn't just me coping that we might lose. And if we do lose, then so be it. But I know where Alabama was as far as opportunity, but I think 13-5 is exceeding expectations relative to what we expected going into the conference play. And so I think it's been a great season for Alabama. And I feel like they've exceeded anything that I could have thought would be possible.
I mean, just think about how we felt about this team after the non-conference play. Just that, which is around the time we made these predictions, for what we thought would be good. This is obviously, those losses were quality losses, but they still were L's in the L column regardless. So you didn't feel good about that anyways. But what this team has been able to do to turn that around into being still, with 2 games left, a potential contender as far as winning the SEC regular season title. It's amazing what this team has been able to do. Like we've seen the very bottom lows and we've seen the really high highs, and hopefully we're gonna see some heights keep going in the next couple of weeks here. But it goes back to what you've said, Christian, a couple of times. This is probably Nato's best coaching job because he's had to do so much with, I won't say so little because he does have a lot of great athletes and talent on the roster this year, but he's had to do so much despite in spite of all the turnover that they've had. And so it's going to be interesting to see how these final 2 games play out, but I am in complete agreement. They could go 1-1 here, and I would still not be disappointed. 13-5 is still, your top 4 seed in the tournament, in the SEC tournament. Probably you're still, like Chris Stewart was saying earlier in the podcast, you're still a 3 seed or a 4 seed heading into the NCAA tournament. And boy, does that feel nice to not have to be on bubble watch anymore.
Yeah, when you think about last March, and not just Alabama being a 1 seed that fell in the Sweet 16, but no 1 seed made it past the Sweet 16. Only 1 2 seed, which I believe was Texas, made it into the Elite 8. It's all about just playing your best basketball as you get into March. I think the defense is improving. I'd like to see more improvement tonight and against Arkansas. However long we're in the SEC tournament, I'd like to continue to see improvement there as well. I think the offense is still clicking as well. And we know who wins in March. Old guards win in March. And we've got some of the best guards and the oldest guards in the country. So this team has everything in front of them. While it may not be something as far as a regular season SEC championship, to do things that Alabama basketball hasn't been done before, it's all about just giving yourself an opportunity once you get into March. And they've done that by getting themselves in what I think will be a pretty good seed, even if it's a 5 or 6 seed. Like, you're there, let the upsets happen, take care of your own business, go out and play with energy and effort, continue to prove on the defense, keep shooting the lights out of the ball, and just let the ball bounce, hopefully in our direction. We've had a lot of unfortunate bounces this year, literally in games, and of course with some of the injury battles that we've had to deal with, not just Reitzel, but Wiggy and some of the other guys that were banged up even before the season started. We're due for some things to go our way, and we're positioned well, should those things start going our way too. So, absolutely nothing to be disappointed as far as the season. Just very excited, that we are now in March of what this team has in front of them and what they can do and the noise they can make, hopefully, in the big dance.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I've it's so interesting because this Alabama team personally is a team that I don't think will make a run. This is just my hot take personal opinion, which means that this team is going to be the team that makes the run. That's just how it goes. Also, I'm surprised you guys haven't mentioned that I'm not banned from Coleman Coliseum, because I went back and did the math, and apparently the last 4 games I've been in Coleman, Alabama shot 25% from 3. And the only reason that it's that high is because I was there for the Texas A&M game this year. So it's maybe we can get a petition going to sign me up to not come back to Coleman, or better yet, if you guys have a team that you want to lose, pay for my ticket. I'll go to the game, and the home team will lose because they won't be able to shoot well. I think that would work well as well. So, other than that, I think we're good.
I do have one more thing that I just wanted to, because this is Crimson Crossover. Let's give congratulations to the women's team getting a double bye for the SEC women's tournament. First time, I believe, since the 97-98. It's been a slow process, but man, Christy Curry has taken this program to the next level, which is still not the highest level that you want to be competing at if you're going to be competing in sports. But she's done a phenomenal job. Credit to the ladies as far as what they've done this year. Want to wish them a ton of success as they get into the SEC tournament, and of course the women's NCAA tournament in the future. But I did want to make sure that we recognized them, and finally getting that monkey, I guess, off their back as far as, getting back into the double bye and having playing somebody with when they're rested and somebody coming off, playing a game or two beforehand.
Also, additionally, shout out to the women's adapted athletics basketball team, who is the #1 national seed, I think, for them. And that we talk about football as being an institution and a powerhouse. I'm pretty sure the women's adapted athletics basketball team has won like 6 or 7 national titles in the last like 8 or 9 years. So shout out to them as well. I'm not sure. I tried to do research this afternoon on the men's team, and I haven't gotten anything. I would assume that they're doing well. I think they're like 20-6 or something, but they don't get the national seeds until next week. So a good time to be a fan of some hardcore or hard court sports. So sorry, it's
if you can't tell, listeners, we're getting pretty tired over here. So.
Yeah, it's like almost midnight. So
yeah,
I think we're good to call it a wrap and get some sleep, because God, I need it. But anyway, this has been awesome experience talking with Chris, talking with you guys, just reminiscing on some great Alabama basketball memories, and hopefully we can make a few more this in March this year, and we're still talking hopefully in April about Alabama basketball. But other than that, I think we're good to sign off. I don't know what I said this time, but
that was it's the flash.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. My teams for my work is for whatever. This is going off the rails. I'm sorry. This is going off the rails.
We should just quit while we're ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, shop J&J apparel. We're all wearing it. I think we said it. Go pick up Chris's merchandise. He has a shirt that says "Let's get out of here" with like headphones. It's really cool. Go pick that up. Just go support him. Support J&J's local business. We have a few ideas coming out over the summer and heading into next season as well. So pick that up. Obviously, go support Field of 68. That's our presenting sponsor. And they do great work. They have a bracketology that they just released tonight, and they do that every Monday and Friday, I believe. So go check that out as well. Other than that, you guys have a great night or great day. Sorry, this is coming out in the morning. And we'll talk again on Spaces following the game. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.